There are suburbs on the edge of cities where the streetlights dim just a little too early, and the woods stretch just a little too far, places where asphalt ends in moss and fences buckle under unseen weight. In these quiet corners, something older than the concrete breathes beneath the earth. It was just past midnight when the first howl shattered the illusion of peace. Not a sound the human ear could register, not fully. But for those who heard it, truly heard it, it was a declaration, not of grief, not of fear, of war. They found the body the next morning near the tree line of Pine Ridge Park. A man, though that was only the surface of it. His ribs had been torn open like paper, his limbs twisted unnaturally. No animal did this. No man could. The death was ruled unexplained. The locals whispered of a cougar, perhaps a bear. But those who knew better, those with fur beneath their skin and blood that rose with the moon, recognized the truth. This was no accident. This was a message, a violation of sacred law. Neutral ground had been desecrated. For centuries, a fragile truce held between the city's werewolf packs. One had integrated quietly into human society, a pack of order, of legacy, of tradition. They were led by Kael, Alpha of the Fenris pack, a wolf whose gaze could command armies and whose voice carried the weight of generations. Charismatic, methodical, and dangerously patient, the other pack had come from the outskirts, younger, hungrier. They did not blend in. They prowled, they grew, and they were led by a creature whose name alone could sour the wind. Riven, Alpha of the Bloodthorn pack, brutal, cunning, unapologetic, a wolf born of ash and blood, who rose from exile with fire in his lungs. The death at Pine Ridge was the spark, but the fuel had been gathering for years. Tension spilled into the open in the underground crypt of the old church, where the supernatural council gathered under stone and shadow. The chamber smelled of damp earth and old blood. Flickering, lanterns cast wild shadows as the council elders issued the decree, a trial of the moon. It had been 100 years since the last, a rite older than either pack, invoked only when diplomacy failed and violence was inevitable. Under the next full moon, both alphas would face one another. The victor would claim the title of true alpha, not just of their pack but of the city itself. The loser would yield or die. Kael accepted with a bowed head and cold resolve, Riven with a sneer and clenched fists. There would be no peace now. Only blood. In the days that followed, the forest stirred uneasily. Power outages blinked through the suburbs like Morse code. Pets vanished. Strange eyes gleamed from the shadows of cul-de-sacs. Children complained of nightmares they couldn't explain. The woods, once a place of casual walks and childhood adventures, grew silent, and amidst it all one boy dreamed of fire. Ezra had never felt like he belonged, not fully. There were days he'd look in the mirror and see something behind his eyes that he couldn't name. Nights when his bones ached, when his heart raced at the moon, and when the trees whispered his name. His first transformation came alone, in the dark, behind the old shed at the edge of his backyard. He remembered falling, flesh bending, tendon snapping, heat like lightning crawling through his skin, and then the silence, the cold earth, the taste of soil and blood. He didn't know then that he carried the blood of both alphas, that he was born of a forbidden union, merging of rival lines that could not be allowed to exist. He only knew pain, confusion, and the sound of something ancient awakening inside him. Far from the boy, deep within a cabin lined with bone and smoke, the seer known as Celine pulled cards carved from antler and wood. Her hands trembled. Her eyes, silver and clouded with power, saw what no one else dared to see. A vision of two moons in the sky, one red, one white, colliding. A city burning beneath their glow, and in the center of it all, a figure with gold eyes and a howl that silenced armies. She whispered a name through cracked lips. Ezra. The wind carried it through branches, through streets, through fur and fang. The packs could feel it, though they did not yet understand. The moon was rising. The trial had been called, and the war for the soul of the city had begun. The city's edge was a strange kind of no man's land, too civilized for beasts, too wild for men. A place where swing sets rusted quietly beside ancient pine roots, where deer tracks led straight to storm drains, and where full moons gleamed off both rooftops and rivers. In this in-between space, the war began to bleed into every corner. The Fenris pack made their presence known with quiet precision. They did not growl or claw. They bought property, installed security systems, formed neighborhood watches. The police chief's son, the one always jogging with his shepherd, Fenris, the real estate agent who smiled a little too calmly when asked about animal sounds in the woods, Fenris. Their reach was silent but deep, rooted in policy, legacy, control. Kael moved like a king in exile, too regal to show desperation, but burdened with the weight of preserving the old order. He stood in his study most nights, staring at the skyline, beyond the trees, watching as the city lights flickered like a nervous heartbeat. Riven wants chaos, he murmured to his second-in-command. We will give him structure, but structure cracked when pushed from beneath. For Riven, chaos wasn't a threat, it was strategy. The Bloodthorn Pack didn't move through society, they stalked its edges. Strip malls, abandoned industrial zones, crumbling skate parks where teenagers disappeared without explanation. Wherever cameras failed and light pollution faded, Bloodthorn planted its roots. The local news began whispering about feral animal attacks. Small dogs vanished. Birds stopped singing in certain areas. A maintenance worker was found bloodied and dazed beneath the highway overpass, swearing he'd seen a man with wolf eyes. Riven watched it all from the roof of a derelict church where ivy strangled the stone like old guilt. He was sharpening a blade against his teeth when a scout approached. Fenris is recruiting, the scout said. Young blood, strong. They're looking for someone. Riven spat, the steel in his grin catching the moonlight. They're looking for him. And they were. Word of a rogue wolf spread like static between both packs. A boy with strange eyes and an uncontrollable shift. Sightings varied. Some said he vanished into shadow. Others claimed he walked in two worlds at once. But none of them knew his name. Only Celine did. She watched Ezra from afar, not with eyes, but with the gifts that cursed her. The threads of fate tangled tightly around him. Two bloodlines fought in his veins. Two destinies circled like vultures. In her visions, he stood at a crossroads, moonlight splitting him in two. She tried to warn him. The first time she appeared to Ezra, it was in a half-dream. He was running. Always running. Through woods that never ended. His breath came in clouds. His limbs burned, and then she was there, cloaked in feathers and smoke, holding a lantern that shone with no fire. You don't belong to either pack, she told him softly, but both will claim you. Ezra screamed awake, clawing at his sheets. His skin still burned with the heat of his last shift. He didn't understand what he was, not yet, but his body did. Each transformation came faster, harder. His bones cracked before he could steady himself. He stopped going to school. His mother, distant, always tired, always hiding something, said little. She seemed afraid of him now. Ezra caught her crying once, whispering a name he didn't recognize, Kael. He began to see them in his dreams. Two wolves circling him, one black as soot, eyes like burning coals, the other gray and gold, its gaze sharp as frost. He would wake, breathless, and outside under the pale moonlight wolves would be waiting, watching, waiting for him to choose. But there was no choice to make. Not yet. Only survival, and the city was starting to crack. A blackout swept through 5 neighborhoods in one night. The local power company blamed a transformer fire. Fenris knew better. Bloodthorn had sent a message. In return, 2 Bloodthorn scouts were found hanging from a tree near the community college. Eyes removed, tongues nailed to the bark. No official reports were filed. Parents stopped letting children play outside. The council, hidden and ancient, did not intervene. They watched. They measured. The trial had been invoked. All else was ritual. Only Selene tried to stop it. She spoke to both alphas, offered visions, warnings. Kael listened but did not bend. Riven laughed in her face, and still the moons rose. Because it wasn't just a full moon approaching. It was something older, rarer. A twin lunar eclipse. One red moon and one silver, both visible in the same sky. A phenomenon that came once every 1,000 years. The wolves knew what it meant. 2 moons, 2 bloodlines, and only one alpha to rise beneath them. Ezra's fate was no longer his own. The war was circling him now. Teeth bared, claws out. And neither Kael nor Riven would wait much longer. It began with the squirrels. They stopped climbing the trees first, froze in place like warnings carved from fur and bone. Then the birds vanished, their songs swallowed by something too heavy to name. By the time the coyotes began howling at noon, the neighborhood knew something was wrong. They just didn't know how wrong. The suburban streets outside the city had always been quiet, with their manicured hedges and their barking dogs and their neatly spaced recycling bins, but now the wind blew colder. The trees whispered secrets to anyone still listening, and the woods that framed the cul-de-sacs pulsed with unseen breath. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was war. The Bloodthorn Pack had moved in fully, Not in disguise, but like a creeping infection. They didn't knock on doors or file tax forms. They made themselves known in silence and violence. A girl was found in a drainage ditch, eyes wide and dazed, muttering about glowing shapes in the forest. A garbage truck was discovered overturned in a ravine, its driver missing and its clawed metal sides streaked with fur. And a man walking his dog by the river swore he saw two creatures standing upright in the fog, watching, before vanishing into the brush without a sound. The local papers ran headlines about wild animal encounters. Wildlife control issued statements about unseasonal behavior. But the real wolves laughed in the dark. Kael did not. His patience was fraying. He watched his pack grow restless. They were trained to remain hidden, to endure, to wait for the trial. But they were not. Blind Bloodthorn was baiting them, and they wanted to answer. "Hold," Kael commanded. "We strike by the moon, not before." But beneath the calm, he seethed. He knew what Riven was doing, breaking the peace not by force, but by fear. If the humans fled, if the structures crumbled, then the only law left would be instinct, and in instinct Bloodthorn thrived. Kael needed a counter. He needed Ezra. The boy was unraveling. Each night he felt less human. His thoughts came in bursts. His bones itched. His ears caught whispers he shouldn't be able to hear. Dreams spilled into daylight. Wolves circled his house. Shadows moved when he turned away. He tried to ask his mother, but she was always avoiding, always busy, always trembling when she thought he wasn't looking. Until one night he found her crying in the laundry room, clutching an old photograph, a younger version of her, beside a man he'd never seen before. He recognized the eyes, though, gold-rimmed, calm, piercing. Kael, she confessed then, between sobs. His father had been Fenris, a pack alpha, but Ezra was different, not just by blood, but by birthright. His mother had been from Bloodthorn before she fled. Ezra was the unspoken, the impossible. A child of both lines. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Because they'll kill you," she said. "Or worse, they'll follow you." And now they were. Selene knew it before anyone else did. Her visions were no longer symbolic. They were urgent, literal, bleeding. She saw Ezra in the middle of the street surrounded by wolves, his skin half torn in shift, screaming as the moon split above him. She saw Kael fall. She saw Riven rise. Then she saw fire, but only one thread. Ever led to survival, unity, not of packs, of blood, of Ezra. So she summoned both alphas. They came, Kael, stone-faced, grieving what he might have to do, Riven, amused. Always the wolf that grinned before biting. "I see ruin," Selene told them both. "Unless the boy chooses, then he must choose Fenris," Kael replied. Riven chuckled. "He won't choose, he'll be chosen." But neither alpha would wait. The trial was days away, and both feared what Ezra might become if he wasn't claimed first. So they hunted. That night Ezra ran. He didn't know why, only that his muscles screamed to move and his blood roared louder than his thoughts. He bolted from his house into the trees. Behind him the door shattered. Something growled. Something else called his name. He ran past broken fences, past creeks glowing with moonlight, into the ruins of an old industrial zone where rusted beams jutted from concrete like broken ribs. And there, for the first time, he saw them. Kael in human form but glowing faintly beneath the surface. Still, composed, shadowed by his pack. Riven crouched on a rusted girder, his teeth too white, his fingers twitching like claws ready to extend. Ezra stood between them, torn. "You're mine," Riven said, stepping forward. "You're more than either of us," Kael whispered. And then Ezra screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain. It wasn't a shout of fear. It was a howl. His body twisted faster than it ever had before. Bones snapped, skin split, hair burst from his shoulders. His eyes flared gold and silver, both at once, and every wolf, Fenris or Bloodthorn, dropped to one knee. In that moment the war paused, not ended, not yet. But every beast in the city turned toward the same moon, and toward him. Ezra had not chosen. He had risen. The moon split the sky in two. One half was crimson, color of spilled blood, of rage, of endings. The other, pale silver, cold as memory, sharp as bone. A twin eclipse, a celestial phenomenon foretold in every old tome the wolves still kept, though most had stopped reading. But the old magic never stopped watching. And tonight, it returned, over the industrial ruins at the edge of the city, where smokestacks once reached for stars and now crumbled like forgotten gods. Two, Packs gathered, Fenris and Bloodthorn. Moonlight caught the steel bones of abandoned factories and twisted shadows into monsters. It was the appointed hour, the trial of the moon. Ancient law carved not in paper, but in flesh. Wolves lined the broken concrete, growling low, eyes glinting like feral lanterns. No one spoke. No one needed to. The tension was a living thing draped over the air like a wet pelt. In the center, Kael stood, tall, composed, regal even now. His coat was draped over his shoulders, though the night was cold. His face was unreadable, his gaze like frost over fire. Opposite him stood Riven, shirtless, grinning, hands twitching at his sides. His muscles twitched with the need to strike. He paced like a predator in a cage made of ritual. Ezra was nowhere to be seen. Selene stood at the edge of the ruins, watching through eyes clouded with sight. She said nothing. Her role was done. This part, they would have to choose for themselves. The moon passed into full bloom above. The light touched both alphas, and with it the howl rose. Kael shifted first, a graceful, controlled transformation. Bones cracked like old wood. His suit split as gray and gold fur erupted from his skin. His final form was noble, terrible, a wolf crowned with age and wisdom, muscles honed by years of discipline. Riven followed with no grace, only speed. His body exploded outward, limbs stretching, teeth lengthening into jagged knives. Black fur, thick as storm clouds, rippled down his back. His eyes blazed red, and then they lunged. The first impact sounded like thunder. Kael's jaws closed around Riven's shoulder, but Riven twisted, slashing across Kael's flank with a back leg claw. Blood hit the dust. Wolves snarled. They circled, clashed, broke apart and re-engaged. It was not a duel. It was a reckoning. Riven fought like wildfire, uncontrolled, devastating. Every swipe was meant to kill. Every bite meant to dismember. Kael was steel, bending, redirecting, absorbing. He took the hits that would kill another wolf and turned them into openings, until even he began to slow. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The blood soaked into the dirt and turned black, and still, no sign of Ezra. Selene's eyes narrowed. She could feel it, a pull in the air, the bloodline calling itself home. Then it came, a gust of wind, sharp, cold, not natural. From the upper floors of the crumbling factory, a howl split the night. Not old, not young, not Fenris, not Bloodthorn. Something other. Ezra stepped into the open, barefoot, shirtless, the moonlight licking his skin. His eyes flickered between gold and silver. His body trembled as if the shift were trying to begin, on its own, and both packs stopped. Kael, staggering, turned toward the sound. Blood dripped from his muzzle. Riven growled, but something in his eyes flickered, not fear, recognition. Ezra walked slowly, like the ground itself was speaking. To him, "I didn't choose this," he said aloud, voice low but clear. "But I won't run anymore." The transformation overtook him mid-step. Not in pain, in acceptance. His bones didn't snap. They reshaped. His skin didn't tear. It evolved. His fur, when it came, shimmered with a hue neither pack had ever seen, not gray, not black. A deep storm-colored pelt marked with streaks of moonlight. He stood twice the height of any wolf. Not monstrous, magnificent. And the air changed. Wolves dropped to all fours, heads bowed, not by command, by instinct. Ezra walked between the two alphas. Kael looked at him, not with sorrow, but pride. "You were never mine," Kael whispered. "You were meant to rise." Riven lunged, teeth bared, fury blazing. Ezra caught him mid-air, one paw, one movement, and slammed him into the ground. Riven choked, clawing at the dirt. Ezra leaned in close. "Enough," he growled. The word echoed like a thunderclap across the ruined city edge. And Riven, broken and breathless, closed his eyes. Ezra stood atop the cracked concrete platform, staring at the moons as they began to realign in the sky, one bleeding into the other, red fading into silver. He howled, not as Fenris, not as Bloodthorn, as something new, something whole. And across the entire city, in every shadowed corner where a wolf's blood still pulsed, they heard it and they obeyed. The battle was over, but silence never comes easily to wolves. For a long time there was only breathing, the heavy panting of exhausted beasts, the huff of fear retreating, of instinct tamed. Ash drifted through the air, kicked up from the ruinous concrete. Somewhere an owl dared to hoot, unaware it had interrupted history. Ezra stood still. His fur rippled in the night wind. Not gray, not black, but a storm-bound shade touched by both bloodlines. His eyes, now steady, had stopped shifting. One was gold, one was silver, balanced, the true alpha. He didn't roar, didn't declare his dominance. He didn't need to. His presence did the work. The ancient bond that tied every werewolf to the lunar rhythm, to the hierarchy of the pack. It bent to him, not by force, but by inevitability. Kael lowered his head. It was not weakness, it was recognition. He limped forward, slowly, blood trailing behind him from the claw wound in his side. And when he knelt before Ezra, there was no shame in it. "You did what I never could," Kael murmured. "You made the law remember mercy." Ezra's answer was a simple nod. No celebration, just acknowledgement. Riven remained crumpled at the edge of the platform, breath wheezing, ribs likely cracked. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced with something more dangerous, understanding. For a creature born of rebellion, surrender was not in his vocabulary, but survival was. And, beneath Ezra's gaze, he did not rise in challenge. He rolled to his side, winced, and dipped his head. For now, he rasped. Ezra let him live, not because he had to, because he chose to. Around them, the two packs stirred, no longer enemies, no longer separate. Wolves from both sides looked at each other with uncertainty, and then back to the boy who had bested both their kings. They felt it, a pull, a bond threading through the marrow. Ezra's howl still rang in their blood. They were not divided anymore. A new pack was being born. Selene stepped forward at last, her long coat trailing through ash and blood. She looked older now, as if the weight of prophecy had finally dropped from her shoulders. She approached Ezra, who was still in wolf form but glowing faintly with human thought. Her hand reached for his muzzle, and he bowed his head to meet it. "You are the bridge," she whispered. "Born of both, master of neither, and now the soul of all." With her free hand, she took a ceremonial dagger, bone-hilted, obsidian-bladed, and sliced her palm. The blood dripped onto Ezra's fur, sinking into him like ink into snow. "I anoint you beneath twin moons," she said, her voice rising into ritual. Ancient and solemn. "Ezra, child of the joined blood, bearer of balance. You are Alpha, not by lineage, but by will." The wolves howled again, not in fury, but in confirmation. The sound swept across the ruins like a tidal wave. Trees shivered. The city lights blinked. The world shifted, and then the moons passed. The eclipse ended. The red faded. The silver returned to its cold, familiar throne in the sky. And Ezra, trembling now, slowly returned to his human form. He stood naked, bruised, but no longer alone. Selene wrapped him in her shawl. "You've changed everything," she told him. Ezra didn't speak. His eyes remained on the horizon, where the lights of the city glimmered, unaware of how close they had come to ruin. In the days that followed, things changed quickly, but not loudly. Kael stepped down, not into exile, but into service. He guided the newly unified pack in structure and wisdom, teaching what could be kept, what could be let go. His name still carried weight, but now it walked behind, not ahead. Riven vanished for a time. None dared pursue him. Some said he healed in the mountains. Others said he watched the city from its gutters. But it was understood, if ever Ezra failed, Riven would return, not for the crown, but for vengeance. Selene disappeared as well. Her cabin burned down not long after the trial. No body was found, but the wolves believed she had left willingly. Her work was finished. Prophets never stay long in peace. And Ezra, he led, not from thrones, not with decrees, but in the shadows where wolves have always thrived. He kept the packs out of sight, but not out of mind. They became guardians of the edge, protecting the suburbs, the city, the sacred balance. Between man and moon, he met with humans in secret, brokered understandings, saved lives they never knew were at risk. And when the moon rose each month, he ran, not to hunt, but to remind the wild in all of them that it was not something to fear, but peace is a fragile thing. On the night of the third full moon after the trial, Ezra stood alone at the tree line, watching the city glow like a distant starfield. The wind changed. He smelled something foreign, something old, rot, not of flesh but of spirit. And then, just beyond the trees, he heard Selena's voice, not in sound, but in memory. "There are things that feed on wolves." Ezra's eyes narrowed. The war was over, but the story was just beginning. Dawn came quietly to the suburbs. Golden light filtered through tall pine trees. Driveways glistened with dew. Children waited at bus stops with sleepy eyes and earbuds in. Sprinklers turned slowly, unnoticed, casting rainbow arcs over trimmed lawns. No one knew what had happened beneath their feet. No one could feel the shift in the roots in the soil, in the air itself. But it had changed. Something ancient now watched over them. Ezra walked through the neighborhood in silence, his hoodie pulled low, his face just another shadow among many. But the wolves knew him, felt him, whether hiding in wooded lots tucked in the crawl spaces of half-finished homes, or prowling the edges of parks after dark. The new pack was everywhere. He had done the impossible. He had united them, not with fear, but with presence, with purpose. Under his leadership, the wolves learned to walk among humans not as predators, but as protectors. The city didn't know they had guardians in the trees, but they did. The new order had no name. It had no crest, no flag, just instinct and silence, and the understanding that while Ezra lived, peace would hold. Kael remained by his side, not as an advisor, not even as a subordinate, but as a father in penance. He spoke little, taught much, and bore the weight of his legacy with grace. Riven was gone. Some said he had wandered north. Others claimed he had joined rogue packs in the Rockies, whispering rebellion to hungry ears. Ezra suspected he had gone deeper, not into the world, but into himself, into the darkness beyond the borderlands, into the wild places where no structure dared reach. And Celine was a question without an answer. But sometimes, on nights when the mist hung low and the wind shifted strangely, Ezra would find feathers on his doorstep, charred at the edges, still warm, a warning, or a blessing. He wasn't sure which. The twin moons would not return for another 1,000 years, but the memory of them lingered, etched into the ruins of the trial grounds, etched into Ezra's skin, even if no one else could see it. There were nights when he stood at the boundary between forest and freeway, feeling both wild and civilized, both halves still inside him, still uneasy in their balance. But they held. He held, and the wolves followed. Still, the darkness was never far. Celine's last warning had not faded from Ezra's mind. There are things that feed on wolves. He'd heard whispers in the forest, tales passed from pack to pack, old things waking in old places. Creatures that didn't howl, creatures that didn't bleed. Eyes in the ground, voices in stone, and something else. Something older than wolf or man, moving beneath the city, following the scent of broken law. Ezra didn't fear it, but he didn't ignore it either. The trial had made him Alpha. What came next would test whether he deserved to stay one. For now, though, the city breathed, the balance held, and the wolves, once fractured, once ruled by tooth and pride, had found something unexpected beneath the twin moons: unity, a new order, and in its silence, the boy who had once howled alone led them all. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling legends and terrifying tales, make sure to like this video. It really helps us out. You can also click on our Ultimate Werewolf playlist to watch more horror and cryptid stories. The link is in the description below, and if you love horror, folklore, and unexplained mysteries, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of fear seekers. But don't stop there. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Because in the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.